We are back. It's colder here in Texas. Starting a new book, Dare to Lead. If you haven't picked it up, it's by Brene Brown. We are just going over the introduction. I think there's a lot of information in there to cover to at least give us some work to work on this first week. So, Dare to Lead, go pick it up. Episode 91. Did I say 81 or 91?
It's 91.
It's 91. You got 9 episodes to decide what we're doing, or 8 episodes to decide what we're doing for the 100th episode.
We've already decided. We just have to tell people.
Okay. All right. So here we go. And do you have my notes?
Yeah.
Okay.
Right here. I'm just glancing back over it because
you read it.
I did. I read it. I read the notes, and I'm so mad when I read the
read
notes.
The introduction. And
yes,
you read
I started there.
a note from Brene Brown.
Yeah, and I was like, okay, which I read, and I even told you, like, this is dumb. Why are we reading this?
Yeah.
And then I got the introduction. I was like, oh, I was reading the wrong thing. But then I read chapter 1.
Yeah, chapter 1's good. I just think there's a lot to cover if we try to.
Right. So now I'm going to go back, and I need to refamiliarize myself.
We got this. All right, here we go.
Yeah.
Why is it saying there's only one input?
I don't know. Why is this? Should this be red?
No, we're good. Now it is. It went back to one input. It's so
weird. Do you have a
weird.
short in one of the microphones?
No. Here we go.
Okay.
Make sure this is all plugged in. Check. All right, here we go. 3, 2. Everyone, welcome back to the Made for More Consulting podcast, episode 91. We begin a new book today, Dare to Lead by Brene Brown. But first, just a reminder, this podcast is here just to help develop our leadership skills and personally develop ourselves so that we can, in turn, lead those around us and make them better. We want to help them build the skills they need to develop themselves into better leaders, and that's what we're all about. Adina, welcome back.
I'm impressed by your little opening there. Good job.
I had to write it down because every time I get lost in landing the plane. So
we're taking off in the plane right now.
Yeah, but when you try to land the introduction,
I gotcha.
It doesn't work.
I gotcha.
So, welcome back. It is getting colder here in Texas, so if you hear me cough, it's because I'm on the mend.
It's like the change in weather just gets you. Oh, here we go. Now we're gonna cough.
Yeah. So, Brene Brown. Renee with the B.
Yeah, Brene
Brown. We are covering a book, Dare to Lead. It's going to be episode 91 and a few more after this. So if you haven't picked up that book, make sure you're going to get that book. There's a lot of information. We're only covering the introduction today. I'm just telling you that because there's a challenge in our notes, and it's already there. You can also share your answers to our challenge and our action steps at the end. But are you reading or listening to this book?
I'm reading this one. Do you want me to say why?
Yeah. Go ahead.
I listened to another book by her, and
we won't tag her in this.
Yeah. Well, sometimes some people's voices are harder to listen to, and it was hard for me to. I feel like she's kind of whining. I don't know. I cannot.
No, I get to say
so even when you said we were going to do this book, I was like, oh, yeah. But I have the actual book. I'm going to read it. And I actually listened to, somebody did a summary of her book. And so I listened to this guy kind of go through like the summary this morning. And his voice, why can't he read her books? That'd be much better.
There's a guy by the name of Nick Lavery. He's a wounded warrior, but he's still in the special ops. And Jamie and I were listening to him talk, and he has a strong Boston accent, and every time he says anything, and his voice is what I'm saying is I don't mind, but I started listening to hers, and I had to put it on like 3 times, 4 times because it's a little challenging to listen to her read her book. So
yes, well, and I don't know, maybe it was some of the content too of that last book that I listened to, but I think this was the very first book I read by her.
Yeah.
No, The Gifts of Imperfection. That was the first one. And then this was second. And then I read Atlas of the Heart. I listened to Atlas of the Heart. And so now.
I'll take this opportunity right now to say, if any of you are listening and you have my first Dare to Lead book, would you please return it? I can't find it. I had to go purchase this book.
And I even looked around for you at the office, and
somebody took my first book. So if you are listening and you have it, at least let me know.
Well, so after you were like, "Are you sure you don't have my book?" I went back and I
Make sure the back of it wasn't
I
resolved
think-
already.
well, and this one that there's no mark. I was like, nope, this is mine. Okay.
Yeah. So before we kick off tonight, I want to remind you guys we have one-on-one coaching. We have a few more spots to fill. The details are going to be on the website.
Are they on the website?
Not yet, because we have the
Well,
form
somebody
to sign up.
texted me, and I was like, I don't know.
It should have been on there, but we are wrapping things up. We're taking what we teach businesses and the owners of businesses, and we're pretty much just bringing that straight to individuals. And we have a few spots left, so we'll talk about that at the end. But back to today's book, Dare to Lead. Adina, when we cover a book, what happens?
We don't read the entire book, which I think is really important. And this week I went back. Check this out. I went back and actually listened to one of our podcasts, and I was like,
Which one?
I don't want to say.
Oh, great.
We'll talk about that later.
Okay.
But I went back and I listened to it, and I really appreciated, because I listened to it from if I had not read this book before, how do I feel about this?
Yeah.
And I feel like you can listen to this and get the gist of the book and get some really good leadership lessons out of it. But I definitely encourage you to, with all of the books, we choose them because we think they're good books.
Yeah.
Read the book. Go. You can, on our website, I'm sure there's a link you can purchase it from there.
Yeah. But yeah, that's very important, just because we don't want anyone, because the last two authors, or there's a couple of authors that have seen our posts and they follow, or they at least look at what we're doing. And so we don't want them to think that we're just, shortchanging them. We want people to go buy this. And our friend Stephanie Crinky has a whole, presentation on this book that she said she'll share with us, that she did for HR training.
That'd be really good.
So maybe she can share that with us. Dare to Lead. Yeah, here we go. The introduction. This time we are actually covering the introduction, is what I said, because I think it's good. So we'll start there. It's probably going to be a shorter podcast, I think. We'll see as we get into it. But I like her definition of leadership, and I'll read it real quick. Check this out. It says, I define a leader as anyone who takes responsibility for finding the potential in people and processes, and who has the courage to develop that potential. So I wanted to stop there real quick, because, Adina, I think when we work with people and some leaders that are frustrated, or companies that are frustrated with growth, or cultures that are frustrated with growth, maybe even the parenting or teams or whatever, I think most people stop at this definition of a leader. I define a leader as anyone who takes responsibility for finding the potential in people, rather than going on and going, I need to develop them. So development to me is the key. Why do you think most people right now stop at, hey, I went and hired this person, and they're going to be the next whatever for a company, and maybe it ends up being a flop because they didn't develop them?
Well, I think, first of all, that there is even a definition of leadership that's kind of goes before even what you said. I think a lot of times people define leaders as like, I am guiding people to do tasks, guiding people to get things done, guiding people towards, accomplishing our mission. And leadership isn't even about that person.
Yeah.
It's about getting things done, accomplishing the mission, whatever. I think even old school, it was getting things done through people.
Yeah.
Well, that's a dangerous like line to walk in the leadership realm, and so even the fact that she can define leadership by it's seeing the potential in people, I think is a step up in a lot of ways. But I think if you're not developing them, then you're just using them.
Yeah, and I think that's where we've talked about on several podcasts, even with Jay, you and I have said this too, is if you have a great person with potential and they are not developed, at some point when that other place, your competition or another place says, here's what we're hiring for, here's a better salary, here's a better increase in pay, they don't have any buying because no one's developing them, so they're going to leave. And so I think that's one of the reasons I want us to remember, as leaders, you're also responsible for developing and the people within and yourself. So
and you're developing them for them, not for you or the organization.
Exactly.
Which I think that's the difference.
We put a quote out, I think Friday on our social media that says we show up to develop people, not a business. The people will develop the business. You just focus on
That's a
developing
byproduct.
people. There you go. Yeah. So the rest of her introduction, I thought it was interesting that they did a study all over different organizations, leaders. What does the world need when it comes to new and upcoming leaders when the world's being developed in the cultures that it is? So here's the answer that they kept saying that they kept hearing, and it says this, quote, "We need braver leaders and more courageous cultures," end quote. That can mean a lot of things, and we'll get into those as she breaks them down. But braver leaders and more courageous cultures, and I think when you think of courageous and braver, it's not so much people willing to take risks or people willing to go, hey, I'm just going to grab the bull by the horns, because I think that's what goes through our head is, okay, I can be courageous, I can step out there and do this. And what we found out through the books that we've been covering is brave and courageous is building trust, being vulnerable, and we're going to discuss all those, but it's not just going, I got to do these action steps, I got to do these tasks like you said earlier. So
well, and she kind of goes through how and talks about how that there were a lot of answers that they kind of consolidated into that.
Yeah.
And I like that she even said, you know, they talked about like critical thinking, analyzing information, rethinking systems, like all of these things that I think there are these words, these that you hear in leadership and in like business all the time, but how when it all came down to it, what they were creating was a braver leader, somebody who within that was going to she says the way she said it was like show up when you don't know the outcome.
That's exactly right. Yep.
And so that I think that's what they're looking for is people that are going to show up and make changes when I can't predict the outcome. We're going to take those risk balance chances.
No, you're right. And I think again we tend to lean and balance towards the things that we can say we want an outcome, we want these tasks done, when people are really going, I need a leader who can show up and help us get those tasks done and help provide this vision and support and be vulnerable with us rather than just focus on those tasks. So one of the quotes she uses in there, I want us to talk about for our listeners is and here's a quote, it's by Marcus Aurelius, and it says, "What stands in the way becomes the way." So as a listener, if there's people listening, how can they take away something from this? What stands in the way becomes a way. So as a listener, if he or she's putting something in there, if something's in their way of them growing, we're telling them right now, Marcus Aurelius, this quote is genius. I think what stands in the way becomes a way. What do you think?
Like, do you have an example of that? Can you think of an example?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's like a personal example for me is going, we talked about it last week. I'm not one to sell myself. I'm not one to talk about myself. But if I want the business to become what it needs to become, I need to get out there and number one, have confidence in who I am. Number two, follow that confidence up with a plan. And so for me, what stands in the way was you got to get past the fact that you don't think you have what it takes. So that becomes a way is going, I got to go through this challenge because on the other side of it, that's the way.
I also thought about it how in the same, like using that same scenario, is that whatever stands in the way, that's the way that your business tends to lean.
Yeah, you're right.
You know,
too, yeah.
And so whatever your roadblock is, whatever that is, that you're instead of moving past it, you let that kind of dictate the way that it's going to go.
Yeah. So if that roadblock's never moved, that's as far as you're going, and that's all you're going to see. But I think also that again, if growth is needed in a specific part of your life, through that roadblock is that growth. So, and I think it's going to be in our action steps, and I know that we already have them in our notes for people to respond with what. So through that quote though, in this introduction, she shares 10 areas that we could be courageous as leaders and cultures. We don't have to go through all of them, but I mean, right off the bat, the first one she said is, and you can just read the first part. It says we avoid tough conversations, including giving honest, productive feedback. So, I mean, think about it. If all our businesses and cultures gave honest feedback and avoided tough conversations,
Yeah, I was trying to, when I told you I listened to this on, I think we talked about it before we started the podcast, but I listened to a summary of what somebody had said about this. And that is one of the biggest things he summarized, was talking about those honest conversations, and how people are so fearful of having those honest conversations. And so what happens when you're not being honest with somebody? Well, it was all the rumbling comes.
The turmoil,
the
gossiping,
division,
yes.
the gossip, all of that comes from the fear of not having an honest conversation.
Yeah.
When if you can be brave, vulnerable, whatever word you want to insert there, and have those honest conversations, how that truly is a like a game changer.
Yeah, because that's the path, right? So if Marcus Aurelius says what stands in the way becomes a way, well, if what's standing in the way of your company becoming better is an honest, tough conversation, that's the way to get through it. I mean, that's the way to have success, is having those tough conversations. There was one in here that I think I'm not saying it rubbed me the wrong way, because I'm not sure I understood number 5. She says, we get stuck and defined by setbacks, disappointments, and failures. So instead of spending resources on cleanup to ensure that consumers, stakeholders, and internal processes are made whole, we're spending too much time and energy reassuring team members who are questioning their contribution and value. So I guess the way I read it, and it may just come, may just clear it up now as I read it, but if people on our team are wondering and whether their contribution even matters or their identity on the team, that's a problem. Do you see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So she's saying, instead of spending your time and energy on the consumers and making sure that things and processes are going forward, you're spending time, you're not even getting to that, because your team isn't even focused on, they're still wondering, hey, do I bring value to the team? And I guess that's where I just questioned it. Like, yes, you want to get to that point, but if you're not even covering the fact that your team is concerned about their contribution, then that's a bigger issue.
Or if your team doesn't feel confident in their contribution, or feel like they don't have anything to offer. So what would you say, like, to a leader that says anyone can do your job?
Anyone can do your job. Mm-hmm. What would I say to that leader?
Because I feel like that is kind of a, I don't know, from like Trust and Inspire, if that's a way that people lead, kind of like you're replaceable. Anybody can do your job. Yeah. You know, and so in this, I think about that. If you don't feel like you're contributing anything that is like authentic or different, how do you think that makes your employees feel? Yeah,
I think it goes back into, it's funny because you and I had these questions as we read these books, and it goes back to almost number one, I think the first thing that comes to mind is autonomy. If it's just a task, like you said earlier, or it's getting things done through people, they feel that to go, I'm just a number. It's like a machine, right? I'm just this person on this assembly line, and I'm just putting this together. I'm replaceable, which means that person's probably wondering, how can I bring something of value to this team? Because I know I have potential, but my boss or my owner or my leader doesn't see it. So when someone says that, I would think that the question that we'd have to ask that owner or leader is, how much autonomy do they have? Mm-hmm. And do you know your team?
Well, and I wonder how do you train people, or how do you bring that out in you? You're right. Anybody can do your job, but you're going to do it a certain way because of your skills, mm-hmm. your experience, your past, your personality. You have all these things that make you. So while anybody can do your job, you contribute what nobody else can contribute because of who you are.
Exactly.
And I think that's the part that she is kind of pushing with that quote is, is that part of it. Yeah. Is you have a specific contribution that you're going to make to this organization, mm-hmm. that nobody else can make because of who you are. Mm-hmm. And it's not necessarily about the job.
Not the job. And I want to, again, if we can stop there for a second, because I had 2 people this week. I'm glad you brought this up, and I love that it's just the introduction, and we haven't even gotten to the stuff, the main section of the book. But I had 2 people this week reach out saying, this is what I'm stuck doing. I don't know why I get stuck doing this. And then there's another one going, I don't know why I have to do this stuff, but this is what I'm doing right now. And it goes back to one of the things I heard one of my mentors, Louis Giglio, and he took it from the spiritual realm and just made it into going, hey, if they hire you just to staple papers, make sure that when you leave that job, after you're done stapling papers, that someone goes, where's the guy that stapled papers? Because they were so nice and neat. Because if I'm a stapler, I'm just going to staple things. I'm just going to throw them to you. Here you go. But if you were to go, who I am is I'm going to be so OCD that every staple is going to line up that when this person gets it, they go, holy crap, this is pretty cool.
Best stapler
Right?
I've ever come in contact with.
And then before they get to their seat, they have everything they asked to be stapled in before on time, which is early, and they go, wow, this is already done. If you take who you are, again, for example, someone I talk to, I'm cleaning the microwave, I'm making a list of things that people have to do in this office, and I'm not the one in charge of the office. To me, I see it as that's a great place to be, because they're leaning on you on little stupid things that you don't want to take care of. However,
back to leading when you're not in charge. That's exactly what he says in leading when you're not in charge.
Make it who you are. Which this person I'm talking about is great at doing that. If she can just see it from a different advantage point, because you and I can get in that same setting where I go, why am I having to cover this again? Well, no, it's an opportunity for you to be who you are and show people.
Yeah, we had a conversation. I had a conversation like that with somebody this week, and it was the same thing over. Don't stop doing stuff because of who they are. And
exactly.
You be you, and you do it because of who you are.
Yeah.
And so if you're picking up the slack for somebody else, pick it up.
Yeah.
Don't set people up for failure.
Yeah.
And not because of them, and you can't see what you feel like they're getting out of it, or and I think that comes back on a deeper level. I'm like, what are you looking for? Is it like appreciation, acknowledgement? Are you just frustrated? What is it that you're looking for in that? And I think that's important.
I also think that that's an opportunity, like she said earlier, to have a tough conversation. If you're not, also, again, that's a whole nother side of it, is if you're doing something you're not supposed to because you're avoiding a tough conversation, then you're going to continue to do that. And the team's not going to reach a higher level because of it. So there's so many layers there. Are there any other ones that you, that last one said perfectionism. There's 10 of them. We're not going to read all 10, but the last one says perfectionism and fear are keeping people from learning and growing. Perfectionism and fear.
Yeah, that was another thing, the whole perfectionism. Perfectionism is, that is rooted in that, like, if I don't do this perfect, then what are people going to think? And she does a lot of work with shame, and so that's what she talks about, is how like that throws you into like the shame cycle when it's not about perfectionism. It's about doing the best job that you can do.
Yeah, and sometimes it's just going, and you spend so much time on fear and perfectionism that you never try something that again leads to regret later on down the road. So she wrote this book to help people become the leaders they can be. The potential's there, but now again she calls it "I dare you to lead." It's a dare to lead. Those 10 areas are broken down over 4 parts of the book. Number one, I'll go with the first 4 sections. Number 1 that we're going to study later is rumbling with vulnerability. I don't know if you saw my note on rumbling. I can't stand the word rumbling, because she talks about a rumble is a discussion and all this crap. And I'm going, sorry, but I said this in my notes. You can read it. I'm not a fan of the word rumble. It feels like we're watching Mean Girls, and that girl's trying to make fetch work, and she goes, would you just stop? Fetch doesn't work. But rumble, and I know she goes and teaches this to all kinds of companies, but the word rumble, I'm like, whatever.
Well, and really, like she just says in that, like, it is like, we're going to have a real conversation. We're going to have a tough conversation. We're going to have a.
But in the first chapter, what's funny is she keeps going, we're going to have a rumble. We're going to get into this rumble. And I'm like, why do you use the word rumble? There has to be a better word. Anyways, I'm getting stuck on that. But within that rumbling with vulnerability, that's broken up into 5 sections. But the second part is living into our values. The third section is braving trust, and the 4th section is learning to rise. So we're gonna be covering those as we cover this book in our podcast. So going back to the word I want to talk about, though, man, she wraps up this introduction, Adina, with something I didn't even think about. And I have to say, I am guilty of thinking about when someone says, hey, put on the armor, like we're going to go to battle, our company's going to go and we're going to do this, or hey, I think of it as athletic example for me is, hey, put on the armor. We're going into a battle. We're going to do this as a brotherhood. But what she did is she picked that apart. She said, well, here's what I put. When I think of armor, we think warrior, fighter, protector, protection, battle, war. And what she wants us to do is she wants us to think about our homes, our schools, our workplace, and bringing the armor off to have a trust and vulnerable place. She nailed it with the school thing, going, what if our students are having to go home and put on all this armor because they're in an abusive home, a relationship? Can we not have our students step in our classroom for at least an hour a day and hang the armor up and just be who they need to be?
Mm-hmm.
And so she goes into that going, that builds relationships, and that builds unity, and that builds trust. And I love that example, because what she's challenging us to do is to go, are your employees, are your children, are your relationships a place where people are having to armor up, or are they okay to armor down? You see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
That's just crazy, because
Yeah.
I never thought of it that way.
Yeah, well, it's like at the walls of protection, or you know, I feel like
Yep.
in today's world, that's what we talk a lot about, is how just everybody just walks around so on guard, being afraid of
Yeah.
getting ridiculed or in trouble or made fun of, or
Yep.
you know, whatever it is, and that's just a culture that we live in. And so how do you take that and make an environment where it is okay to it's okay to make a mistake, it's okay to say the wrong thing,
Yeah.
you know, without people thinking you're dumb or whatever it is. In that, I think about schools as a great example, but even in business, there has to be a better way.
Yeah.
And I think in a lot of corporate settings, it's more about trying to be better than somebody else. So that's what it's all set up with, is if you say something, I'm going to say something that makes you not look as smart, because I'm going to say something that makes me look smarter than you.
Yeah.
And where does that go? That goes nowhere.
Yeah, and that means just another chunk of armor being put on because I don't trust you.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm so critical. I'm so guilty of this when me and Jamie are talking, and we talk about something where I go, you didn't know that? And the way I say that, she's like, don't make me feel stupid. And I don't remember what it was recently, and I just looked at her and said, what the heck are you talking about? You don't know that? And she looked at me, she's like, why? If I knew that, I wouldn't be asking. And so I'm so guilty of doing that. But I think of that in how quickly the armor can be put on in a boardroom, in a staff leadership, in a home, where someone says something, or they say they're struggling with something, and that second, or that your failure to think through your response can put up some walls.
Well, and I
quick.
think a lot of times what happens too is let's say you have a pretty good work environment, but people still have armor from the outside world that they're carrying on, from old jobs, past relationships, what's going on at home, whatever it is. And so it's not even about just creating a healthy environment there. It's creating an environment that helps people remove the armor that other people have put on.
That's right. And so as a leader, your job is not to get the task done. It's to get to know your employee and your employer, or employees, or even your boss. If you're we talked about that leading up the chain, meaning, and Jocko talks about that, just because you're not in charge, your role is to go, okay, how can I best support this boss who has an ego? How can I get into the inn and know him or her by taking care of him or her, even though you don't want to, and get to know your people?
Yes. And I think about that on an organizational level, that even like a peer-to-peer relationship, like how dangerous that, how toxic it can become so quickly if you have one person who is wearing all of the armor and is shooting out all of this protective, conversations, things about the job, the workplace, and how damaging even that can be. So how you have to watch out for that, and with your teammates, with yourself, because that's just as bad.
That's where the culture that she's talking about gets ruined. And so how that, and like you said, you use the word toxic. I think that's how, when we go back to what Simon Sinek says, the circle of safety, is if everybody's looking out for themselves, the organization's going to fail. So if you create a circle, just like 300, and you use your shield to protect you and your brother or sister, you get more out of that because there's this trust. And it's funny, again, another leadership book that we're starting to talk about, just an introduction about trust and vulnerability. And we talked about this earlier. I can't believe I'm going to say this, but I'll be vulnerable. I don't really care. When we were in the car, and I was like, I don't know what the freak my mom was thinking when she had me wear, or she made that outfit, the elf outfit, and I would wear it to school. And I don't even know what we were talking about. And I was
Do we
going,
need to find a picture of the elf
please,
outfit?
Mom, whatever you don't. I still remember it was green and red. It has bells. It had those freaking bells.
Sure,
all
you
over
were
it.
so cute at the time.
It was like 3rd or 4th grade, and I was like, no wonder I got my butt picked on, and how I had to lie about having friends sometimes. I don't know what we were talking about, but I think I was like, I don't want to put, it's just interesting because I was somewhere in there, I was trying to be who I wanted to be, but I was a bit of a nerd. So, and that, it's just weird.
I don't remember what you said to start that, but whatever you said to start that. You said like, here we are again. Like we read these leadership books. Here we are again with trust. This is where, and I think we said this when we read Trust and Inspire, how so many books are just, they just kind of recycle some of this. But I do love that she is really emphasizing trust and your values. That your values and your passion have to align. I feel like she says that either in the note from her or in the introduction. How your values and your passion have to align. And I was like, here we go again with like your values.
Know your why.
You have to know your why.
Yep.
It all goes back to that. So I feel like if you are listening and you know, maybe you're a newer listener, you have to go back and listen to our podcast about Start With Why. Because that is such an important thing.
Yeah, and I think all this stuff that we're talking about, all this, I mean, trusting, vulnerability, authenticity, as amongst a team, amongst a home, relationship, the ultimate goal in the end is to get engagement amongst everyone, to have trust. But if there's no trust on a team right now, if you're struggling as an individual with relationships or whatnot, you have to look at yourself and go, what is it that's blocking? Like we said, the whole quote, what is standing in the way of me reaching that goal? What is standing in the way of me becoming more vulnerable? Well, if that's it, then that becomes the way. You have to go through that to get there. And I think, again, she does a really good job talking about the armor in her introduction. And this next part that we're going to cover in the next few podcasts are going to be broken up into 5 sections, but I don't know how many we'll cover in the next episode, but it's called Rumbling with Vulnerability. And she talks about being vulnerable. What's interesting is that she says quite a few cuss words.
Oh yeah, and if you listen to her read, or listen to the book, her audiobooks, it is funny because most of the books I listen to, I would say 99% of the books I listen to, they don't cuss. Like
Jocko's, I don't even think do.
There's no cussing.
Yeah.
And then she just drops the cuss words, and I don't just feels weird driving in the car and just somebody's cussing at you.
And that's why, again, there's still a little bit of me that says.
But that's her. That is who she is.
Cool. And that's why I have questions. But
yes.
We won't tag her.
Well, I'm gonna try to re-embrace her personality.
Yeah. And so what we'll do is we'll let you guys know which ones we're going to cover. I think maybe we can cover the first few of these, maybe a couple of sections, which is, anyways, just read the book. But what I want to do is see what Stephanie's notes consist of.
Yeah, I would love to see that from
it's
her.
Like a presentation. I know that Brene Brown says that she has a lot of free resources on her
and
website.
I think it's just BreneBrown.com.
Yep, for this specific book. But one of the action steps, it's just one action step this week, and it's in our notes, and now I put in there how you can share it with us, but it's just what is standing in the way of you taking your next step. And I put in your personal growth, in your parenting, in your leading at work, and in your relationships. The answer to this is where the path to growth is. Can you create a plan to move through whatever is standing in the way?
Yeah. Okay. I just immediately was and I don't think it's the same thing in every area.
No, I don't think.
Because I can look at that and tell you like right away what some of them are.
For you?
Yeah, for
Oh,
sure.
okay.
Like, I mean, personal growth, like I think about, I don't think it's consistency, but I think it's a consistently challenging myself at a higher level. Like I've done the same thing for personal growth, which is like read a book, answer some, like it's been a lot of, go to a conference every now and then. I mean, it's the same things. I'm like, okay, well, like what's next? How do you challenge yourself at a higher level?
Yeah.
You know, I don't know.
That's good. And again, when we go back to that quote, because it's the title of the podcast, what stands in the way becomes a way. To me, I think just this podcast for me, like I want our action steps. I want our podcast to be better. So how do I get this professional podcast to be more professional or better?
Do you listen to other people's podcasts besides Jocko? Like, do you ever listen to podcasts just to see how they do it?
No, not specifically for that, but I do know that we've gotten.
I think you should. I think you should like pick up other genres. Like just pick like go and Google like the top 10 best selling or best grossing podcasts, and go and listen just to listen to how they do it. What is it that they do? I
think that the thing that I know we could get better at is like Andy Stanley and Maxwell. If you click on their notes, and that's the thing, is you can set up a Google document where your notes live for other people that they can fill out, and you can correspond with them going, hey, I saw that you made this note, or you filled this out for us to follow up with, all through just the podcast notes. And I'm going, typically we just put information. No, we want to put some
that they can interact with. Yeah, that's good.
So think through that. I mean, you know, what's standing in the way of you creating your next step. Before we wrap up, make sure you check out the podcast notes. And then last week we launched our one-on-one coaching. There's a way to register that we walk through. It's actually in our podcast notes. If you click on the link, it'll take you to the form that you can fill out. And there's a few more spots available.
I'm hoping that it's also on our website.
It's not. I just checked this morning.
Good gracious.
Okay. You can get that there.
So you have to go. Yeah, let's
go to the podcast
let's
notes.
get that there, because I don't look at the podcast notes on my computer. I don't even look at them. I mean, if I look at them while I'm driving, do people like actually read the notes while they?
Oh yeah, especially if they have. That's what I'm finding out. Especially if they have like.
See, this is good information.
Something that, like, again,
Apple
perfect
podcast.
example is if you go to Maxwell, he has fill in the blanks. Every episode has a fill in the blank. Why does he do fill in the blanks? So that you can go to your team and go, hey, look what I filled out today on this podcast. Andy Stanley has a few fill in the blanks, but more of his is, hey, here's what you can work on with your team. And I think, again, we can give that back. But it'll be on our website. The actual page is already made. It just needs to go live.
Yeah.
I think it needs my approval. So check it out, one-on-one coaching, a few more spots. And then I got some exciting news from one of our nonprofits. Epic Warrior Podcast is launching.
I saw that. Has he put his first episode out there?
His first episode comes out today with ours. So today's Sunday.
Okay.
We're recording early, but
perfect.
I was in Midland. And I got the chance to help him record his first podcast. He was nervous, but Epic Warrior. Again, I love the just the heartbeat behind the nonprofit is to help people understand that there's only 1% of our population that goes running towards the fight, whether that's in the military, but his focus is more first responders, EMS, paramedics.
So interesting. I listened to another podcast and they just did a whole episode. They called it The Dark Arena.
Mm-hmm.
And it was basically about people whose jobs are like that see the darkest of the dark in the world.
Oh, yeah.
And like how they kind of manage that and what that looks like. It was very interesting. The one I listened to was on people who track down like sex traffickers.
Yeah.
You know, and so they watch a video. She was with the FBI and she just watches videos of kids being all day long.
Yeah.
But that's her whole entire job.
Yep.
That is insane. And I'm so thankful that somebody is willing to do that job. Just like a first responder.
Yeah, and I mean if you think about it, like this morning I was trying to think through that and Jay and I always talk like, yes, you can do a ride along, but when you're in your uniform with a gun, a taser, all this stuff, and you're walking up to a car,
a whole different responsibility
to
level.
just give somebody a ticket, a traffic ticket. You don't know what's in that car waiting for you. And think about it, a guy, a woman, they do this every day. Or driving up on an accident, like what are we about to see? Who's in that car? What's happening? A fire. Or again, Jay made it a good point to say, think about the people that answer the calls at the dispatching office. They have to hear what goes on over the phone. And so he counsels them, but he's giving back, and there's some pretty cool projects with Epic Warrior Podcast. So you guys go check it out, Epic Warrior Podcast by Jay, and
Well, I'll definitely share that with the first responders in my life.
Yeah,
I feel like that'd be a good platform for them.
Yeah, there's a lot of projects that he's doing to supply some cool things for first responders when it comes to SWAT to EMS, and so there's a lot of work that needs to be done to help support those people. So, and he said it, you know, there's only a few handful of people that give those people a bad name, just like any profession. So anyways, guys, we appreciate you listening. Thank you for following us on the socials. Continue to do that. Continue to share this podcast if you would. Rate us, give us a 5-star. Hope you guys have a great week. Thanks for listening. Remember, we exist for more. We're here to offer more. Don't ever give up. Every single one of us is made for more. We'll talk to you guys later.
Bye, guys.
That's pretty good. 38 minutes.